Don't ask any questions.
You do it. We'll call the Willmar City Council meeting for Monday, August 15th to order. Roll call.
Mayor Calvin.
Here.
Councilmember Christensen.
Here.
Anderson.
Here.
Amman.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Meskey.
Here.
Plowman.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Fagerly.
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any proposed additions or deletions to the agenda? Councilmember Rahman?
If it doesn't get discussed prior to stormwater issues,
Okay, we do have that as a agenda item, item number 10.
is there going to be action steps on this or just a report?
It'd be a report at this point, but you'd like some action steps at the end, is that what you're saying?
No, that's fine. If we can, I'll discuss it then. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, I would ask to have number 10 moved to number 5, so we can talk about that right away. I know we do have a lot of people in the public that are concerned about this. I'm concerned about it as well, so I'd propose that if that's all right with the council. Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. So, first off, I just would like to make a few comments. Wednesday night was a rather stunning evening for a lot of us in the city of Willmar. We had a substantial rainfall at my home. We received 10.6 inches of rain. We had flooding, but not near to the extent of a lot of people within the city of Willmar. We had basements that were flooded all the way up to the rafters. We had people that had 2, 3, 4 feet of water in their basements, along with people that had just a couple inches. And so, on behalf of the mayor's office, I am sorry that that happened. On these heavy rain events, you know, we can't prepare for those, but we can show compassion when those events happen. We had businesses that were flooded. I talked to numerous over the weekend. I talked to numerous small business owners along with large business owners who were dramatically affected by these storm waters. Our local Stingers had to move their last 4 games up to Spicer. So on behalf of the council and the mayor's office, I'd like to thank the city of Spicer for opening up their stadium so that our Stingers could play the last 4 games up in Spicer. And so the economic impact that happens with this is huge when we have a storm event like this. But when it gets right down to each one of us, it's personal for all of us. It's personal when it affects our homes. I had a lady talk to me over the weekend, and she had some family heirlooms that were in the basement that they had kept for a number of years. They were not able to salvage those. And so those are the things that really tear at our hearts when we have situations like this happen. And so I've asked staff to prepare a report so they can report out to us on what happened. But I certainly, on behalf of the mayor's office, and I'm sure the council as well, express our sympathies to you. I have been in contact with emergency management, started contact with them on Wednesday evening. Talked with them numerous times on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, today. And at this point, there's a lot of questions out in the community about why we haven't called a disaster or declared a disaster in town. And those disaster declarations come when the infrastructure within the community, the public infrastructure within the community, meet a certain dollar amount. And those dollar amounts have not been met, which we'll hear tonight from staff. The other thing is that there are people working in our community right now, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services, are both working on projects that may become available, grants that may become available. Nothing's available on those quite yet. I just met with Blue Cross Blue Shield within the last hour. They're looking at doing something within our community as well, but the details on that will be worked out as the week goes on. So on behalf of the council, staff, and the mayor's office, our sympathies to you for the losses that you've received. We know there's a lot of water heaters and furnaces that don't function, and we're working with doing everything we can. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the city administrator for his report, and then Council Member Amon, I'll see what your comments are. So, City Administrator Cruz.
Mayor Calvin and council members, we've received reports of anywhere between 8 and 12 inches of water that evening, rainwater. We've heard reports of displaced residents. As far as city operations, our employees were out all night and day, and our sewer department was really 2 days of getting our operations back in order. I'm going to turn it over to Sean Christensen, our Public Works Director, to cover Public Works and Operations. And then I'm going to ask Kevin Halliday, who is covering some of the insurance issues with the city, to field some questions. And then I'll circle back and answer any questions following that. So with that, Mr. Christensen.
Thanks, Larry. Mayor, members of the council, appreciate you allowing me a chance to talk a little bit about this this very large storm event that all of us have the privilege of being part of history at this point. As everyone knows, Wednesday night we started raining, and as watching the radar, it always seemed as we were at the tail end of this system. And then as another storm event came through, we were still at the tail end of the system. That being said, as Larry mentioned, we're hearing reports anywhere from 8.5 to up to 12 inches of rain in different areas. And Public Works crews were out through the clock, closing and securing roads, intersections that were inundated with water, in order to keep the public safe. Most of the public adhered to that. There were some that thought they would try the intersections anyway, and some of them, their cars were still in those intersections the next morning. Kids playing in the street, which is great, fun to see, although dangerous with the water levels up to electrical junction boxes and manhole lids displaced because of the pressure of the water. There's some unfortunate things that can happen in playing in those streets and those intersections. That being said, as the rain continued, at about 5 o'clock in the morning, it overwhelmed our sanitary sewer, our new wastewater treatment plant, because of the amount of pumping that we required, or that we manually overrode to reduce the amount of damage to basements to what it is. We overrode our own system in the wastewater treatment plant, therefore overwhelmed that system and put that system over capacity. Excuse me. Over the course of the evening, we bypassed 9 different lift stations, 4 of them around Eagle Lake, 5 of them around town. When the wastewater treatment plant itself was becoming overwhelmed, we abandoned the bypassing of those lift stations in order to concentrate on the bigger picture on the wastewater treatment plant itself. At that point, we had Public Works crews assisting the wastewater crews. Wastewater crews were out around the clock for 2 nights straight to get that system back in order, which is why we had what ended up being a voluntary water conservation for 24 hours. I was hopeful, as some of you may know, I was hopeful to get that lifted within 12, but it took a course of 24 hours to get that wastewater treatment plant back down to operable levels, rather, in order to allow the public to go back to normal usage, or what seemed like normal usage. Coupling all of these issues with the fact that it was the county fair did not add any help to anyone's system, or ease any of the frustrations by those that witnessed and lived through, and in a lot of cases pumped from this particular storm event. We had at least one basement that had some structural damage, and That damage in turn caused a ruptured water line, which added water to the water that was already in his basement. So we've got some of those some of those items that are still ongoing. Still fielding phone calls of people that have had concerns and had damage to this with this event, and still have crews on call ready to help out as far as that goes. We've pretty close back to normal operations now on our systems and our crews, and feel like the system we have, storm and sanitary system, handled things as well as imaginable at this, given the volume of water that was received in this particular storm event. Hear a lot of people talk about, was it a 50-year, was it a 100-year, was it a 200-year storm event? Those numbers used to mean more. What we've done in the engineering practices in the past few years has changed from a year basis event to a percentage-based event. As many of you know, we've had a couple 100-year storm events in the last few years. And so that being the case, that's actually the reason that they've changed to this percentage-based system. So to explain a little further, a 100-year storm event is now considered and has for the last few years been considered a 1% event, in which case an easier way to see that is at any given time or year, you have a 1% chance of having that storm event. And that may help some people's minds explain this a little bit better. This particular event was a 0.1% event. Given the fact, or given those odds, we could have this event, we have a 0.1% chance to have this event at any given year. It was a lot of water. No systems are designed to maintain or to control that amount of water in that short amount of time. Storm events or storm drain systems, we require developers to design to a 25-year, 24-hour event. This being closer to the 1,000-year event, based on charts, makes it very difficult to design money-wise, and it doesn't make much sense to design to that event if it happens 0.1% chance. Our sanitary sewer wastewater plant, there's been some concerns on whether did we design it correctly, was it built correctly, was it, should we have built it larger? Yes, it was designed correctly. Yes, it was built correctly. No, we shouldn't have built it larger. The system was built to handle 16 million gallons at a max flow. An average flow or general flow is 3 to 5 million gallons. During the course, the peak of this storm, we received 23 million gallons. So there are no, I would venture to guess there are very few facilities that are designed to handle that type of storm event when it virtually doesn't happen. I've yet to talk to anybody in the area that has ever seen this much rain in this short amount of time. And so that kind of gives testament to the frequency of these type of events. All that being said, I'd like to give a shout out to the wastewater and street crews, public works crews. We called in engineering staff, we called in clerks to handle some phone calls early. I know PD and fire was out around the clock as well. So the guys, the employees really stepped up. They did everything in their power to minimize the damage and the destruction to this storm. And I'm really proud of everybody that did that and stepped up and did that. So not sure what else you want for a report, but I'd field any questions.
Thank you. Larry?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I think staff echoes what the mayor's comments were about this being a tragedy, and it does get very personal for people losing their personal property, and it gets to be a tremendous amount of work whenever you're dealing with water. So we too want to thank our residents and businesses and the Red Cross who handed out many cleanup kits and the other disaster relief organizations. And I too echo Mr. Christensen's comments about staff. We had a new employee that just showed up a couple days before the event, and he got put on one of the pumps, and to be honest, he got forgotten about because he was out there all night manning that pump, and it was raining, and it was a heck of a night. He never complained once. He just did his job. Insurance is a question that the city office has fielded a lot of questions on, and our city clerk treasurer, Kevin Halliday, handles that work, and I'd like to have Kevin make some comments about the insurance for this event.
Mr. Halliday?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I've been in council with league staff who will be out here reviewing some of the claims that we've got. Today we had about a dozen claims, some Friday when I was on vacation, but I've contacted all of them. And generally it's maybe in two categories. There was about one half of those claims of pure water coming in the basement, and we denied those claims outright as having no coverage and no action on the city's part. The other six had some concerns that the league staff want to check out first. They were claims of raw sewage in the basement, most of it shooting out of toilets and so forth. It's probably only one other step to verify our procedures. We are required to do jetting of these sanitary sewer lines. We have meticulous records. If there's a claim, let's say Grayson 14th or 15th or something, our staff has the records of when they jetted it, and the league staff does want to see those records to make certain. So I'm not promising anything to these people. In fact, I'm, if anything, taking away high hopes. Most likely, there will not be any coverage offered by the city of Willmar. But on those raw sewage ones, we want to let the league make that determination first on our protocols.
Okay, thank you. Larry, I too had heard about the individual over on Country Club Drive that stood outside for 17 hours. I had two residents in that neighborhood call me and commend staff. One of the people who called me said that they had brought out lemonade at one time and cookies one time, and at one time they brought out a chair and said, "Would you like to sit, seeing you've been standing for these 17 hours?" And he said, "No, I've been told I shouldn't sit." So, I think at times we need to understand as citizens, our employees are human as well. And if you see one of our staffers sitting in a chair, it might be the fact when you drove by that they've actually been there for 17 hours. And the reason they're sitting in a chair is they're physically exhausted. I too want to thank staff. Staff did a phenomenal job. Kim Lindahl, our emergency management director for Candiac County, was on a family vacation up in Walker, left the family vacation to come back to deal with his situation. Our fire chief, Frank Hansen, spent, I think, the whole weekend assisting residents within our community. Councilmember Nelson and I assisted with the Red Cross delivering the cleanup kits. I was there on Friday, Saturday, we're trying to get out in the community, hear what you're saying. Kevin, thank you for that report on what insurance can do. Sean, thank you for the report from your staff as well. We've got excellent staff. We've got excellent people that care a lot about what happens in our community. And also our local media for getting the information out. When we need to get the information out about conserving water on a voluntary basis, they put that on the radio right away. It was on Facebook. It was on websites and everything. So hats off to our community. And also I want to thank the people that help their neighbors. I had a number of people come up to me and say, my neighbors dropped everything and came over and helped me. And so I know there were people within our community that were getting assistance from a lot of different people. And so we've got a great community. We're very fortunate to live in Willmar. And I just want to thank everybody for all the stepping up and getting the job done what needs to be done. So, Councilmember Amman.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Everything's been said all I can just say is ditto to it. I've heard a lot of good things about staff. I talked to some of them in the evening the rain. I'm just wondering, due to the fact, the report of Mr. Halliday, that some of this might not be able to be covered by our insurance plan with League of Minnesota Cities, and a lot of people that I've talked to have not had, don't have flood insurance or minimal coverage for their basements. I'm just wondering, at what point in time do we say this is a disaster? Well, to us, this was a disaster, and the people that lost all their personal items in their home. And I'm wondering if there's some way, although we don't have an emergency fund to assist people, if maybe, if nothing else, staff and the council might want to consider decreasing or eliminating the building permit fees for the water heaters, the furnaces that were all flooded and ruined, and inspection services to the people that were hurt and affected by this flood, if that's compatible or palatable with everybody. Also, flood zone classification. Kevin, I know you've talked about that in the past. I don't know if this will change things, but I hope that that might help us to some degree, so people can get the correct insurance. Also, as far as pumping goes, I know there's a lot of different places that needed to have pumps, and I'm not sure if we are in a situation like this supposed to provide or assist people, citizens with their personal pumping. But I know that Mr. Kuzman over on the other side of town had a 6-inch line pumping out water as fast as he could, and it was impossible to keep up, and that's where the 20 homes were flooded. I would like to just say briefly, we've talked about this stormwater issue for several years. Back in 2005, I think, was the last big event where we had to litigate a issue with a constituent on their basement collapsing, and I'm just curious if the council and the mayor and staff, maybe we could take a hard look at this again and maybe have some real hard meetings, and the mayor could call some of our former engineers to come in and have a cup of coffee and see what other possibilities we can do versus the $50 million project that Bar Engineering came up with several years ago to help resolve the problem. And I'm convinced that with a series of pumps, moving water, and some additional retention ponds, we might be able to help alleviate some of the pressure that we experience from time to time. And I just wanted to throw those out for ideas, the council and staff, and maybe the mayor could run with that. Thank you.
Well, there are a couple questions in there. I don't believe that the council has the authority, Mr. Scott, to waive building permit fees. That's what I remember from conversations in the past. Is that correct? You know? I know you're getting caught flat-footed here, and I was looking back for Mr. Peterson, but he's not here, so.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it's something I'd honestly have to look into if that would be something that can be done. We have, there have been other large rain events in other cities, and we have come up with some ways to provide some assistance to citizens who have suffered damage as a result of the bad weather. And we can certainly have those discussions here as well. I will look into exactly what can be done on inspection fees and building permit fees and get an answer to staff very soon.
Certainly. Councilman Rahman, would it be all right if he got that information? We got it in the Friday memo?
Sure. Whatever we can do to move forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then on the question about the floodplain, that again is council action, as I recall, is that we have determined not to do the flood insurance. Is that right, Mr. Halliday? I did talk with Megan DeShepper today because I had a number of questions about that over the weekend as well. I had 3 businesses that contacted me that they used to be able to buy it up to 5 years ago, and then 5 years ago they could no longer buy it. And so I talked with Megan DeShepper about that today. If the council were in the appetite to reconsider that, we certainly could do that. Although that then does force some people to mandatorily have to buy it. And I know that the contention has always been the height of the normal water level within the community. And we have to be careful that we don't make things worse by trying to make things better. And so, and then your third thing is to have the mayor take a look and talk with some of the past city engineers. I'm certainly more than willing to do that. Certainly willing to call a group of people together to have that conversation again. So I'll have Mr. Cruz coordinate that, and we'll make that happen. And then we'll report that back in a Friday memo. So I'll report that back. Thank you. Anybody else have anything to say about the storm event? Councilmember Anderson, followed by Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for Mr. Christensen back there on the wastewater treatment plant. I don't fully understand everything that's happening, but I hear we had to bypass. Was raw sewage going out, or did we just discontinue bringing in stormwater into the plant? What actually happens?
Sure,
Mr. Christensen.
Councilmember Anderson, Mr. Mayor. We were never bypassing the wastewater treatment plant. What we bypassed was 9 different lift stations. On any given rain event, larger obviously, we have to bypass a station or 2, which is why we are rebuilding some of these stations because of the age, because of the volume that they can no longer handle. Those bypasses are, let me back up. When you have this kind of a rain event, there's enough infiltration into that system that raw sewage, as you say, the wastewater, is very diluted. So that water is pumped directly into a marsh, wetlands, some of those lines, along those lines that are pre-approved by MPCA. There are a number of steps that need to be taken when that happens. So along with this particular rain event and all other large events, we have to have a duty officer from MPCA contacted within a short amount of time and tell them exactly what happened. It's followed up by quite a bit of paperwork to get to that point. So we had to bypass lift stations. We never did bypass the wastewater treatment plant itself. What happened at the plant is we manually overrode to allow more pumping into the plant than the plant itself would take, which is why we had to manually override it. The system itself won't allow that. The reason for that was to reduce the level of sanitary sewer in the system, thereby reducing it in some people's basements potentially and in the lines itself. As an example, the Western Interceptor, or the last line that dumps the municipal wastewater into the plant, varies obviously, but let's say 30 to 40 feet deep. The water itself was in those manholes up to, at one point, 2.5 to 3 feet from the surface. So there's that much water in the system, and if you take an elevation of the top of that water, that's where it would be in people's houses. So we chose to overload our own system in order to reduce the amount of waste in the piping itself, therefore trying to reduce or minimize the amount of waste in people's basements.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wondering if staff is doing anything with Mr. Kuzman to try to correct what happened there. Is there some conversation going on and maybe some kind of correction?
Mr. Christensen.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Christensen, those conversations have been ongoing with Mr. Kuzman. Both parties are well aware of the issues in that area, and we have done a few things in order to try to alleviate that problem. We've got a couple other items. One that we've actually received quotes for along Highway 12 to help alleviate that particular problem. That being said, would that have prevented this? Probably not. Everybody had flooding. The entire town did in the area. So putting a couple more pipes in the ground would not have prevented Mr. Kuzman's from flooding, nor would it have prevented anybody else's from flooding in this particular storm event. There are a couple other items in the system in that area that we have discussed, and we have some plans and things drawn up internally to try to tackle some of those items, and we're still working towards those.
Also, Ditch 23A is still pretty high. Does that mean that that's probably the height of Wakanda, where it's going into?
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Christensen, that's likely. Although without doing a full survey on it, it's hard to tell. I mean, as you can see, all the lakes in the area are elevated. And we've got bike paths and pedestrian paths that are currently underwater and will be until the lakes go down. So there's a good chance that that is the case, or there's a chance that that is part of the case. They're currently doing construction in Grass Lake. That, could that cause that ditch to be temporarily elevated? Possibly. There's a number of different factors. That ditch has been elevated all summer. There's one earlier in the summer. There was some beavers wreaking havoc downstream and blocking things, and so we've had a number of different issues with that particular ditch system this summer.
Councilmember Maskey.
Another question about the wastewater treatment plant. You said it handles up to 16 million gallons. I mean, in a normal flow, you said 3 to 5. Is that 16 when you manually override? Is that the maximum capacity? Or did you go over that, do you think?
Mr. Christensen.
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Meske, I've got a chart here that was original when we designed that plant. The average design flow for that plant was 5 million gallons, 5.25 million gallons. And these are million gallon day is how they do the volume on that. They designed it for an average wet weather, meaning average flow and a storm event for 7.5 million gallons. Okay, so on a typical average day, full capacity, wet weather, it will take 7.5 million gallons on a regular basis, no problems whatsoever. The original design parameters that we put together to overbuild the system, if you will, would allow us to accept 16 million gallons. The whole reason for the override, or the whole reason for the automatic system was so you didn't go over that 16 million gallons. By manually tricking the system into firing up a third pump to relieve the piping, we pushed it to, at peak, 22.5 or 22.7 million gallons. So you can kind of see we had some issues out there as well. We chose to overload that system because of the lack of residents in the area, knowing full well we'd have a report to MPCA regardless of where that system overflowed.
I just want, just based on what you said then, we should be giving them a medal because this would have been a lot worse had that not happened.
Correct.
So thanks for tricking the system.
Yep. The other thing I think, Sean, Mr. Christensen, to point out is the fact that you not only did that, but you took the municipal side and blended it with the industrial side as well, which also took more capacity, correct?
That's correct, Mayor. I didn't know how many of the gory details everybody wanted to know, but that's exactly.
We don't want to get real gory. We're talking wastewater.
Well, that was my thought as well. Yes, the municipal side was the one in jeopardy and the one that was overflowing the system. There are valves set up at the full plant that allowed us to turn some of the municipal water into the industrial water. It's a separate system for those that don't know. And we also contacted our largest industrial users and asked if they had any way they could reduce their flow temporarily to help, because knowing full well we'd have to put some of the municipal side across the system, if you will. We got to the point where it was a balancing act, and do you turn valves enough to overflow the industrial side, or do you turn them back to overflow the municipal side, or a little bit of both? The wastewater guys spent about 48 hours feathering that system, trying to figure out the best possible connection in order to get the system back online.
Thank you. Also should be pointed out that Mr. Christensen was on vacation to spend time with his family as well over the past week. And when I talked to him on Thursday morning, he had been up all night, been working all night, and he was a little droggy when I talked to him, but he was quick as a wit with his answers on what I needed to hear to know how we could get the right information out. So thank you for your tremendous leadership through that very difficult crisis that we had in Willmar. And without your staff and without yourself making those very well-informed decisions, it would have been a lot worse. So thank you very much for your hard work. Appreciate it.
And I can't take much of the credit. The staff knew what they were doing, and I ended up being kind of a cheerleader in a lot of cases. So the staff gets the credit for that. Thank you.
It's a sign of good leadership. Next, we'll have the consent items.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the consent items. Discussion. Seeing and hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Scheduled hearing, consideration of land sale to Forever Family Properties. I'm not sure who's taking that. I've got Bruce written down here, and he's not here, so Larry, you're taking that? Okay, Mr. Cruz?
Mr. Mayor and Council, before you is a request to adopt an ordinance, assign a number, and publish the ordinance for sale of Lot 1, Block 4, Willmar Industrial, 4th Edition. They propose to construct a 4,800 square foot building, moving at least 6 full-time employees to the Willmar location, all of which exceed the city's wage threshold of $12 an hour. They plan fall of 2016 construction. I believe that's September. Staff would recommend adoption of the ordinance.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak to the issue? Seeing and hearing none, we'll close the public hearing, bring it to council. Council, your wishes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the land sale to Forever Family Properties. Discussion. Councilmember Amon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, the proceeds of the $28,000 will be going into the general fund, correct? Or is there a certain line item that it needs to be brought back to? Because I understand we used to have a fund for maintenance of the old industrial park that was used to build a new airport. I'm just wondering if that money maybe shouldn't be put back into that account for maintenance and improvements of the old area of the industrial park. I'm just curious, somebody could fill me in on that. I think it's a great thing that we sold the property. Congratulations.
Mr. Okens.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Amon, at the present time, those proceeds will be going back into the Industrial Development Fund, as council has had that as a practice in the past. That will be something that certainly could be changed moving forward, but that will be addressed in the budgeting cycle. But I believe this is the third lot sold, and past practice that would remain in the Industrial Development Fund at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. This is a resolution, correct, Kevin? Roll call.
Councilmember Christensen.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Amon.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Meske.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
The resolution passes.
Next, we have the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities Report, 2016 Legislative Session and Activities. I'm assuming this is going to be a very, very short report because I don't think a whole lot got done.
Well,
So,
you are right in that not much got done, but I do want to highlight a few things that we tried to do during the course of session. So, first off, let me express my admiration for the City of Wilmer's resilience here in light of your recent challenges. It's excellent to hear the good work that folks at local government are doing in the face of crisis. My name is Bradley Peterson. I'm an attorney and lobbyist with the firm of Flaherty and Hood in St. Paul. And as you know, we do the legislative advocacy and association management for the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. I've been here many times before, and I know many of you well, and I appreciate the opportunity to give a little update on the 2016 session and a little bit of insight into what may or may not happen here soon. So, jumping right in, just as a matter of reminder, the coalition has 88 members all across the state. We deal exclusively with 5 issue areas: LGA and property taxes, economic development, annexation and land use, transportation, and environmental regulation and funding, strictly from a Greater Minnesota perspective. And also, too, I should say, as I'm going along here, if you've got things that you want me to questions that you have, or if there's items that you want me to dwell on a little bit more, please don't hesitate to interrupt. So the 2016 session, looked to tackle a pretty big agenda in a very short amount of time. Of course, last session, 2015, was the state budget session which even in itself took a special session in June 2015, if you recall that. But they did have unfinished business in terms of a tax bill. No tax bill was passed in 2015. They also had a lingering discussion about transportation, which we've been in the middle of for several years now, as well as this is the traditional year for a big bonding bill. So a big agenda, not a lot of time to tackle it. The budget forecast continues to show a surplus, about $900 million going into the beginning of session. If you recall, at the beginning of last session, 2015, it was well over $1 billion. They spent some of that in the case of doing the state budget, but we came into this with $900 million in the bank. Some concern over economic downturn that made lawmakers somewhat cautious in how to dispose of that, and you really had sort of 2 different thoughts on what to do with it. Generally, the House Republicans were looking at tax cuts and using some of that surplus to address some of our transportation needs. On the Democratic side with the Senate and the governor, they were looking at one-time spending on items, but then also using new money for transportation. And so that was kind of the broad dynamics of the session. Our goals should be pretty familiar. Getting LGA back to the 2002 level, we're still $45.5 million short of where that was in 2002. We had a bill last year that got some traction, passed some economic development programs focused on Greater Minnesota, specifically around workforce housing, broadband, and then the Greater Minnesota Business Development Public Infrastructure Grant Program, BDPI for short. We supported a comprehensive transportation package, and then also some funding for water and wastewater infrastructure. We spent a lot of time in the 2015 session on that issue and got some traction in terms of some funding for mandates and dealing with aging infrastructure here in the 2016 session. So where LGA stood at the beginning of 2016. Again, trying to get back to the 2002 level. The Senate supported this proposal last year, put it in their tax bill in 2015. The House went in opposite direction with cutting $84 million basically by taking it out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth. In the case of Minneapolis and St. Paul, they would have cut about half of their local government aid. In the case of Duluth, which is a CGMC member, they would have cut about 2/3 of their aid. And we really pushed back against this. We thought that if you do that, you tend to undermine the program on a statewide basis. And if you are taking LGA away from the big cities, it is not too long until it will not be available for cities like Wilmer. And again, there was no tax bill in 2015. So that was the beginning of this session. So in the interim, we worked with communities. We got 75 cities to pass resolutions in support of local government aid. We did a lot with the press and the media, a statewide conference call, actually that Councilwoman Nelson participated in January, that generated a lot of editorials and positive stories that LGA needed to be part of the solution this legislative session. Meetings with Speaker Dowd, the Majority Leader Pepin, others, key legislators, and then meetings with legislators in their individual district. We worked with cities to basically meet with, and we really focused on Republican House members, because those were the ones that we needed to move in this direction. And so we had meetings around the state in December, January, and February. Our staff was crisscrossing the state in the winter, having these meetings with cities so that legislators could hear firsthand from their city officials the importance of a LGA increase this session. And so you can see the cities that we had meetings in over that time period. Those meetings, by the way, I think were very effective, and I think were very key in terms of moving the ball during session. So the tax bill expectations as session went on came into focus. We made LGA the focus of our legislative action day that was in early March. The House backed away from huge tax cuts to focus on more modest goals. They had been talking about a $2 billion series of tax cuts when session began. Of course, there was not a $2 billion surplus to deal with, and so expectations came in line with where funds were in terms of what folks wanted to do. And it was interesting because as session developed, became a general belief that the tax bill out of the big three, taxes, bonding, and transportation, might actually end up being the easiest of the ones to sort out as they went into conference committee. The final tax bill that came out of conference committee in the last 2 days of session, that Saturday night at 10:30, included a $20 million local government aid increase. Greater Minnesota, of the new money, share was 56% versus 43%, and the Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth shares ended up being about the same as they've been historically. So the LGA appropriation, this is what it looked like currently, 2016, $519 million a year goes into the local government aid system. We would have added $20 million to that had the tax bill been successful. For Willmar, this is what it would have meant, and there's a chart in here that goes through this. So right now, 2016, Willmar is getting about $4.5 million. Just under current law, if there are no changes in terms of the appropriation in 2017, you'll get an extra $10,000 just by how the formula goes up and down. What the tax bill had would have been an additional $133,000 for the city of Willmar, had that passed. Another item in the tax bill, and the item that is actually, if you look at this sheet here, which is pretty dense, that we worked on, has to do with commercial industrial property tax relief. This was a high priority of House Republicans. There would have been a number of ways you could have done that, and so we worked with the legislature to really fashion a solution that looked at the state's commercial industrial property tax, so nothing impacting your local tax base. But as you know, there's a state CI tax, and we were able to put in place $100 million, or not, I'm sorry, not $100 million, an exemption from the first $100,000 of value for businesses. And so that would have been a total of about $730 worth of relief capped out in terms of the state CI tax. Very good, actually, for Main Street businesses in rural Minnesota. And the balance of the benefit to that program really would have tipped for Greater Minnesota. But again, no tax bill because of a, this is the what typical value on CI property. No tax bill, though, because of a drafting error at the end that would have cost the state $100 million having to do with charitable gambling. And so because of that error, the governor was forced to pocket veto it, which is a shame. The tax bill passed both bodies of the legislature with quite a bit of bipartisan support at the end of session. But because of the nature of how they were doing things, very quickly at the end, mistakes were made, and a $100 million mistake is kind of a doozy. So that did not happen. Would be the subject, I think, of a special session if there is to be one, and I'll talk more about what I think the chances are of that here at the end. We, though, however, the coalition has been out of the gate pretty quickly on urging legislators to find compromise, do a special session, even if it's just for the tax bill alone, because there's a lot of benefit for communities through local government aid, through the CI property tax relief, the other tax relief for families across the state that's in there, and then any number of individual projects that cities and localities across the state had in that. The tax bill, very important. There wasn't one in 2015. Doesn't look like there's going to be one in 2016. That is very rare. Usually there is a tax bill in a biennium. And so to not have one, I think, is pretty significant. couple of other items that we worked on. We spent a lot of time this year working on clean water infrastructure and the bonding bill. If you recall last year, the coalition spent a lot of time pushing back against the MPCA and a lot of regulations that they had in terms of new water quality standards that we did not think were necessarily scientifically supported. We spent a lot of time on that, passed some things through the legislature that ended up getting vetoed. But I think one of the outcomes of that effort last year was a realization on the part of the administration that if we are going to impose all of these costs on localities and have all of these tight, stringent standards, somehow we're going to have to pay for them. Because we are talking about, on a statewide basis over the next several years, billions of dollars of cost if we're going to adhere to these standards. And so the governor actually, in his bonding bill, put down a down payment in terms of some of that cost through 3 different grant programs that CGMC has supported historically for $167 million a year. These items made their way into the Senate and House bonding bills. We lobbied them aggressively, including with some media, an editorial that got published in 6 papers across the state, including the Star Tribune by the Albert Lee Mayor, Vern Rasmussen, on why these things were just very, very important. They were, like I said, embraced by the House and the Senate, and the final bonding bill that they looked at passing the last night of session included $133.5 million for these programs, so pretty good. There was also language that was included that would have allowed for more of the share of these projects to be picked up by the state in terms of moving some maximum dollar amounts for grants and then the cost share percentage that the state can participate in. Right now, the state can participate in about 50% of the costs of these. We were able to pass some language that moved that up to 80%, and then in the terms of dollars, there's a cap that we moved from $3 million to $7 million. Again, however, tied up in a bonding bill that did not make it through the end of session. That one was especially interesting. It was very much last minute, 11:20 p.m. on Sunday night. The House, a bonding bill materializes after bonding bills failing in the House and the Senate earlier that week. Passed by the House, makes it to the Senate. There's a disagreement over whether or not light rail transit in the metro area should have been included. The Senate adds it, tries to send it back to the House. The House is already adjourned, 11:56 p.m. Nothing anybody can do. The bell rings and everybody goes home, which is unfortunate because there were a lot of projects in the bonding bill, including this clean water infrastructure money that communities are relying on. I've actually been surprised as I've been traveling the state talking with cities, how many cities had, just small things, but very important to their communities that got tied up in this mess in terms of the bonding bill. Another item that was in the bonding bill that we pushed for is the BDPI program. Again, this helps pay for some of the costs of public infrastructure related to private business growth. The governor came out with $21 million in his recommendations. The House and the Senate both had money in their bonding bills, which failed. The last final bonding bill, which also failed, had $12 million into it for this program. It's a very significant program. It's been very successful. Communities across the state have used it. Deed loves it. We love it. Our cities love it. Hopefully there will be a bonding bill sometime soon that will address this as well. Broadband, I won't dwell on this too much except to say that there is some problems with the policy. There were a lot of focus on dollars, how much you put into it, $35 million, $100 million. Our concern really was to make sure that our cities would be eligible for that money. We started to notice that a lot of the grants were being distributed to very small communities and sort of far-flung and remote parts of the state. We did some digging in and found that only 3 of our CGMC cities would have qualified under the old standards. We were able to pass some language this year which improved that, and so many more communities and parts of our cities are now eligible for grant money. The amount of money that's available to cities that already have some level of service but not great service is limited, but we were at least able to push that goal so that more of our communities did qualify. And actually, my understanding is, looking at some of the data today, that whereas large parts of Willmar would not have qualified previously, they will now if you were interested in a grant. Transportation continues to be a muddle. There was no solution in 2015. Again, this gets down to everybody agrees on the size and scope of the problem, roughly $600 to $700 million over 10 years. But how do you pay for it? House Republicans believe that you can pay for it through existing resources and shifting around some money that's going into the general fund from various auto-related taxes, taxes on sales of auto parts, things like that, and then finding some efficiencies within MnDOT. Senate Senate Democrats and the governor believe that you need new revenue. And then, of course, there was this controversy over light rail transit and how do you find a match for the federal funds. There's about $835 million of federal funds that are coming into it. Some non-federal share of $130 million or so is required. And so the solution that they actually came to at the end that was in the bonding bill was to have the metro area just do it. And so it would come out of metro resources. It would not have been the state writing a check. But again, that was kind of the discussion that shipwrecked the bonding bill and a transportation package. So nothing happens in transportation. The governor had a last-minute compromise that involved tab fees. That went nowhere. Bonding bill included some transportation, but of course that went nowhere as well. Everything blows apart. No comprehensive transportation package. Bonding bill fails. Tax bill was pocket vetoed, as I said. So without a special session, there will be little to show for 2016. No tax bill means no LGA increase. No bonding bill means no water infrastructure or BDPI money. And we have no transportation package. There has been discussion about whether or not there may be a special session, and legislative leaders and the governor have been meeting throughout summer. And, you know, there had been some flurry of activity 3-4 weeks ago where there's an agreement. Yes, we want to have a special session. We're targeting the third week in August. But it was not clear at that time whether or not there had been any agreement on the items that they still disagreed on. And after last Friday, the governor and legislative leaders met again, and clearly there is not agreement on the things that they didn't agree with on May, namely Southwest Light Rail Transit. So if you had to ask me today if I had $5 and put it down on whether or not there was going to be a special session, I'd feel pretty safe betting $5 that there would not be. I think by the time that you get to beginning of September, you're going to be too deep into the election season. Everybody already kind of feels like they've got the upper hand from a messaging perspective. It's very interesting. I think everybody thinks they're winning. And so it will wait until after the election, and then the new majorities in the legislature will figure out what to do with taxes, transportation, bonding. That's my guess if I had $5. Now, if I had $50, I don't know if I'd put it on the table, but $5 I feel pretty safe. With that, let's see here. You know, lessons from 2016, I think our active lobbying on LGA made a difference. We were able to take a bad situation in terms of the two bodies going in very different directions on local aid and got them to a $20 million increase, but it takes a lot of work and effort, and I think our cities really did quite a bit to make that happen. I think our aggressive media efforts continue to be effective, and on the environment, I think what the story there shows is that it's, you know, sometimes these are multi-year issues, right? We started with last year raising a ruckus on the standards and the regulations. We've spent time taking legal action against MPCA, and that had the result of loosening up some dollars in the bonding bill to at least help pay for these. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to let up on the regulatory side. There are still things to do there. In fact, I had a discussion with one of the attorneys in our office today that it looks like MPCA is involved in putting some unadopted rules and standards into permits that cities are facing, and so that might be something that we'll take some scrutiny at and start with the legal and regulatory side of things, and if that's not successful, then we take it to the legislature. But it's those are multi-year type of efforts. Upcoming events, we typically do candidate forums during the legislative session. We just finalized a candidate packet with information on CGMC issues that went out in the mail to every legislative candidate in rural Minnesota, talking about LGA, economic development, transportation, environmental regulation, things like that. And we usually pick 5 to 6, 7 cities to partner with around the state to do candidate forums. We've held several of those in this room. And those we typically pick legislative races where there are hot competitive races, I think you have a couple of those, or where there is an open seat. And so we're in the process of finalizing where we might want to do those here coming up. Fall Conference, November 17th to the 18th, that's where we'll set our legislative agenda for the next session in light of what happens during the election. And then our Legislative Action Day, where we bring everybody down to St. Paul, is scheduled for February 1st. Have some briefing in our office, set you loose on your legislators, and then recap the evening at Mancini's over some cocktails and some steak. So that is what we've got coming up. Really encourage you to participate. Wilmer's been a strong participant in CGMC for a long time. We're lucky to have Councilwoman Nelson on our board. And with that, I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Okay. I didn't get you introduced before you started talking, so Bradley Peterson with the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. So thank you for your excellent report as always. It's been fun this past year working with you, and the work that you get done down there at the legislature is phenomenal. And I would encourage any council member that would like to see how sausage gets made to show up down at the coalition and watch the process. So, and also I'd like to thank Council Member Nelson for serving on the board. So. Any questions for Mr. Peterson? Councilmember Christensen, did I see your hand go up? Councilmember Amon, Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Brad, for coming here annually and briefing us on the session or the inaction of the session.
Yeah.
LGA is a huge part of our budget, as it is probably for every city that belongs to the coalition and others. And we all know that nothing can be given to us unless it's been taken from us. Now, we know what portion of our budget LGA is, and we know the revenue stream that we get from taxes and fees, et cetera, to work with our budget. Can you briefly tell me where do the funds, what's the revenue stream to the state besides property taxes?
Well, historically, and this gets to the Minnesota Miracle, obviously, the state collects a sales tax, and that's when that was instituted. Localities used to collect their own sales taxes and various types of taxes. In the early 1970s, that authority was taken away. And now, as you know, and you've gone through this process here in the last couple of weeks, that if you want it back, you've got to pass a resolution and have a referendum and then go to the legislature and ask for authority for a local option sales tax. So that would be one of those sources of revenue. And then, of course, you have the state CI tax, which collects about $850 million a year as well.
The reason I ask is I'm a firm believer that consumers spend the money more wisely than the government. And if they would take less from us, we would probably need less LGA. And another reason I ask is I bring up quite often that we never know the true cost of government. We just don't know it because there's so many fees and taxes that keep coming from us in different directions. I mean, there's a sales tax on everything, and we just don't ever know the true cost of government. But again, thank you for sharing with us the inactivity.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Amon.
Thank you for giving us this brief report, and thanks for keeping it brief.
Absolutely.
Very consolidated, and thanks for all the information we get on the computer, on emails that are going out, what's happening at the legislature, and thanks for doing your role for representing us in the outstate area. I would say rural rather than outstate, but have you got any inclination what's going to happen with the I think recommended a 5 cent per gallon tax on gasoline? Has anything been discussed more of a compromise on that or not?
Well, and that was, the compromise that the governor put forward at the end of session. His original proposal 2 years ago would have been the equivalent of about 16 cents a gallon. It was a wholesale tax. What the discussion this year was, it got narrowed down to a combination of something in the range of a 5 cent gas tax, tab fee changes, which could, depending on how you do it, raise actually a significant amount of money, anywhere between $200 and $400 million a year, and then some general fund money from the surplus, again in the range of $100 to $200 million a year. So that was the kind of final status of those discussions. There was some pushback, though, from those who don't think that the state needs to raise any new revenue, not only against the gas tax portion of it, but then also against the tab fee changes and increase, which would, of course, raise new revenue. And so that's kind of where things got left at the end of last year. And I think that folks now are really looking at what happens in the election is going to be determinant of how that gets solved in the future.
Excuse me, have you had, during this process with the legislature, has the coalition taken a stand or on the sales or the gas tax? And what was it, and where was the opposition?
Yeah, the coalition has generally supported the idea that we need new revenue, and so we did support gas tax. We weren't real active in terms of lobbying that particular aspect of it. Where the coalition spent its time lobbying on transportation was on two items. One, that in any comprehensive package, you needed to have more money for city streets, both for those cities under 5,000, which currently don't get any money from the MSA system, and also for cities over 5,000, such as yourselves, for whom the MSA funds are very limited to a small number of streets. Last year, the legislature did do $12.5 million on a one-time basis for cities under 5,000. And so this time last year, cities were getting a check for $25,000, $26,000. That was just kind of, some of them didn't even know it was coming. And then the other item that we worked on in terms of that we felt had to be part of a package was corridors of commerce funds. Of course, these are the funds, new program that the coalition helped start in 2013 that funds those interregional corridors where there is some gridlock and some narrowing. Highway 23 is a good example, Highway 14 in southern Minnesota, to really, Highway 12 would be a great example, corridors that we rely on for interstate commerce to move goods and services, but are not up to the task. And so we lobbied that if you're going to have a comprehensive transportation package, it's got to include those two things. We support the idea of more revenue for the system, but we weren't terribly active in terms of pushing it. And that's actually one of the things that the coalition is now trying to figure out next year is, what should our role in that discussion be? And should we be more aggressive and more assertive in terms of taking a leadership role on new revenue for transportation purposes? And so we actually put out a survey to our members that hopefully many of you got and have taken and weighed in on. I'm not sure where that stands right now in terms of what the tally is, but that's a processor that we're going through, because honestly, if the coalition itself is going to put itself out there saying this is what we believe, we've got to make sure that the members are there with us.
Thank you.
Okay. Bradley, thank you for your hard work. Could you just fill us in a little bit? I know there's a lot of government overreach from MPCA, and I know that last year you had asked us for some additional funding to help with that fight, and I know that Councilmember Nelson lobbied me very hard on that issue, so she did her work, I assure you of that. But could you just kind of tell us where we're at on that particular issue? And I know that there's talk again of this year coming back and asking for some additional funds on that. So could you fill us in a little bit on where that's at? And
Yep, for sure. And, so last year we did a lot of work at the legislature on the regulatory and framework. But what we felt that we needed and were missing were some resources to fight the battle on another front in terms of in the courts and at the state agencies. And so last year, we requested of our cities a voluntary assessment from communities. And we tried to raise about $150,000 in additional resources for sort of a legal and regulatory fund, and then also some of those funds to go towards media efforts. Because one of the things that we found is that as you're going out into the public and saying, you know what, MPCA might be off base on this, you become an object of attack from folks who just say, well, those cities and those folks in rural Minnesota just want to pollute. And so we had to have some funds available to do some media and push back and tell the real story of what our communities do and the challenges that you face that you heard a lot about today. And so last year we raised about $150,000 through that effort. However, we are in the middle of that. One lawsuit against the MPCA, we're looking at other legal and regulatory actions related to the agency, and then also some actions versus the EPA, which we thought may have been asleep at the wheel in terms of what they've allowed MPCA to do in terms of approving some water quality standards that we didn't think went through a proper scientific process. And so we are coming back to our cities and again asking for a voluntary assessment. And we sort of quantified it a little bit more this time on the front end so that cities could put it into their budgets as they have that discussion. And so we were looking at 35 cents per capita as the request. And some cities will do more, some cities will do less, some cities will do the number, some cities won't do anything at all. For Wilmer, 35 cents per capita, we calculated that as costing the city about $6,850. That would be the voluntary assessment. Now, the other action that the CGMC membership did take at the summer conference in Austin was to add a 4.75% surcharge to dues for an environmental program to supplement those efforts for all cities. And we call it a surcharge because we don't necessarily anticipate that this is going to be a permanent thing. What we're trying to do is build up an environmental fund to take some of these actions against MPCA, to do some of the research that we need to do, and where there are cases where cities may have precedent-setting issues in front of MPCA to help them out a little bit. And so for the city of Wilmer, we calculate that and an additional $1,788 in addition to your regular dues. And so, like I said, we don't anticipate necessarily that that is going to be permanent. It will be reviewed by the membership every year. But in order to sort of be in the arena, we figured we needed about $200,000 of additional resources. So the voluntary assessment, we're hoping to raise $150,000. The proposed surcharge would raise about $50,000. We had members who, some of them wanted to do it all on dues, which we thought would be too much. Some who wanted to do it all voluntary assessment because they don't feel like they maybe have an issue right now. But I think, our belief is that eventually these are issues that every city will face, and the work that we do right now may not seem to benefit every city, but in 5-10 years, you might be the ones on the hot seat, and the work that we do now will benefit folks later on. Does that answer your question, Mayor?
It does, yes, it does,
Great.
exactly, yes. Okay, additional questions? Thank you very much for your report, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bradley.
Have a great rest of your meeting.
You bet. You could certainly stick around for the rest of it, or I know you have a long drive ahead of
I'll
you.
get the report from Robert tomorrow.
Oh, certainly, yes, that sounds fine. So thank you so much for being here. Next, we have open forum. Laura Becker. Kevin, you have our timer?
It's been so long since we've done this.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, city staff, residents in the chamber and at home. My name is Laura Becker, and I live at 1010 Candio High Avenue Southwest. I can honestly tell you it's been 4 years since I've been in this chamber. A long time. I'm here, obviously, as I used to always think. I walked up to this podium with storm water written on my forehead. Yes, I was a victim this last week. First of all, I would like to say thank you very much, Councilmember Christensen, for all of your above and beyond help in my particular situation. I want to reiterate the fact that the city paid for a 1998 BAR report, and in that report it listed 16 flood-prone areas in the city of Wilmer. The last report that I've seen from BAR Engineering, dated 2006, 11 of those outstanding flood-prone areas still exist, and the city does need to fix them. This issue last Wednesday was the worst in my neighborhood in 14 years. I opened my front door. The water was at my bottom step. I had 2 feet of water in my basement. You are destroying the infrastructure in this city if you stand out in those flood-prone areas where you keep sending the city's water back, not what falls from the sky or what pools in the intersection, but the city's water coming back from ditch 23A You are destroying the infrastructure underneath. The manhole cover at the corner of 10th and Candy Ojai did blow. I have been told that those were all welded down. That did come off. It was put on at 5 a.m. the next morning. The power box on the corner of 10th and Candy was totally underwater, and that has never happened in 14 years. We did have children swimming in the intersection of 10th and Candy Ojai, even after numerous encouragement to get out of that water, because if that box blows, you, the city, would be liable if they were electrocuted in that water. I'm questioning whether or not the sewage that came out of the wastewater treatment plant reached ditch 23A, and I'm hoping that someone would be able to answer that question for me. The residents of 10th and Candy are tired of being the city's holding pond. The city is continuing to work in a deficit to stormwater management. You started with a deficit, and even once you've implemented new regulations, you are still running behind because the flooding is worse than it has ever been. And if there is sewage in ditch 23A, that means there was no pure water going into anyone's home. I would like you to seriously consider thinking about your local option sales tax and what you plan on using and doing with those dollars. I think enough residents in this community.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Lauren Schultz.
Good evening. Lauren Schultz, 901 Irene Avenue, Southeast. Well, we got too much water coming into Wilmer and all the ditches. The reason being we've never used a CP39 in Candy Ojai County. I got it from the Agriculture Commissioner. His legal staff did all the research on it, and it was in effect since 2008. The Crow River's used it since 2008, and we've never used it. So I talked to your railroad engineer about this Y deal, and the representative from Marshall, the wetlands mitigation representative, I asked him if he'd ever heard of it, and he said, yeah, that's a wetlands agriculture form. So my question is, why is the Crow River using it? And came right down to our office here and sit down at their computer and says, where are you going to dig? And I told him where it was, and he said, sign here. Done deal. Where's the problem? Our senators and legislators aren't voting for using the tools we've had and have had here since 2008. When I build a farm terrace on the land, it's 4 1/4 inches in a 24-hour period with a 6-inch discharge. Your highway department or anything else doesn't have anything remotely close to this. And all your water when it leaves town goes on agriculture land. Let's make it even instead of doing what we're doing. We got all the chances in the world to do this right out there, right along where your Y road is going to go, Highway 12. It's all low ground, and it's right there. There's a ditch there. Let's make room for this water so Wilmer's water can discharge. If we don't, it's going to get worse, a lot worse. What you saw this week is going to be the normal if we keep going this way, because I've never used that form on any land from Pennock all the way to Candy Ojai. And that's a lot more acres than what you guys got. Measurement-wise, it's tremendous, and the opportunity is there. But if you don't use it, it's going to cost you, because there's no end to this. Absolutely no end to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Pat Curry and Dave Little have asked to make a presentation on the 10th anniversary celebration for the Wilmer Municipal Airport, and told them they could come to the open forum, and they would have 3 minutes to speak. So,
I thought you said Saturday morning was half an hour.
I'm sorry?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. We're just wanted to give you a brief update on the 10-year anniversary at the airport. You talk to people and they say they can't believe it's 10 years gone by already, and the airport is up and functioning, and maybe some folks haven't been out there, and we're inviting the public to come out from 10 until 3 on Sunday, September 4th. Got a lot of activities planned. We're going to have brat feed. Genio's providing 2,000 brats. We have a very competitive bid from Cashwise for the buns and chips and plates and napkins. We have some activities. We're going to have static display of radio-controlled aircraft. We're asking the pilots to have their planes out of their hangars and maybe tell the public how their planes are used. I think Lifelink will have a display. We're going to have drawings for airplane rides. I think there's going to be a flyover during the event.
Hopefully so.
Yeah. Did I mention entertainment from 12 to 1? We'll have a band there or something.
Well, not a
provide some
band. There's going to be
entertainment.
2 guys.
And then Bruce Yeager is going to have a presentation about the history of the airport and the terminal. That'll be ongoing. I think the Wilmer Car Club is going to have a display. The Boy Scouts, Dan O'Mara, he's a commissioner. He's been working hard getting the Boy Scouts to do provide the cooking and the serving. And then Rambo has provided us with some caps with special logo on it. And the proceeds will go to the Boy Scouts for doing that. I think we've got a lot of help lined up. We had a meeting on Saturday morning with the Airport Commission and a bunch of other folks. I think there's maybe 20, 24 people there. The mayor was there, gave us some encouragement and appreciation. And, when you're planning an event like this, there's a lot of calling, meeting with people, running here and there and everywhere. And so I think we got all the details nailed down and hope to see everybody there. And what else?
Yeah, it's sort of difficult to get up here after what we're hearing here. And by the way, Mr. Holliday, you spoke about 14th and Grace. I think you said that. I live on that corner, and I got water in my basement. And I haven't had water in my basement for 30 years. But anyway, Mr. Mayor, I called you. You came to the meeting on Saturday. We have given these caps to every one of your members here, except you. You were gone, and I'm going to give this to you. Ron was in your place that day.
Thank you.
Yes, and I hope that you all will participate and wear your caps that day. Anything else?
Oh, and I should mention that we had excellent help from Beth Fisher at the CVB. She put together the flyers that you have in front of you. We also had assistance from the EDC, and that information has all been sent out by Megan DeShepper, I think, to all the airports in the state. So we're expecting great things. It's going to be sunshine and no rain. And we're expecting a good crowd. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
The only thing that will defeat us out there is rain, and we don't need it. Thank you very much.
That's correct. We don't. Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda, we have a proclamation for Parkinson's disease, and I'll go ahead and read that. Whereas Parkinson's disease, which is believed to be a progressive neurological movement disorder of the central nervous system that affects more than 1 million Americans who have been diagnosed with the disease, and whereas in Minnesota and surrounding communities, National Parkinson's Foundation Minnesota drives awareness and outreach by bringing together leaders on Parkinson's disease to improve patient outcomes for those living with Parkinson's, and whereas the National Parkinson's Foundation of Minnesota will host an event on August 17th, 2016 to highlight its work to support individuals and families living with Parkinson's disease. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Marv Calvin, Mayor of the City of Willmar, Minnesota, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, August 17th as Parkinson's Awareness Day in the City of Willmar, and urge all residents to participate in activities and events which will support the fight against Parkinson's. So, Kevin, can you make sure that that gets delivered to them? I appreciate that. So that official proclamation for Parkinson's Day, August 17th, 2016. Next, we have Finance Committee report. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Finance Committee did meet on Monday, August 8th, and I I want to thank the substitute members that were there. There were a number of us that were gone. There were no public comments. The next item was networking switches for City Hall and waste treatment. Information Systems Coordinator Ross Smaby presented a request to the committee for authorization to purchase new networking switches for City Hall and the waste treatment plants. The current server switches at City Hall are both the old and new waste treatment plants are past due for replacement. Funding in the amount of $56,000 was approved in the 2016 Capital Improvement Program for this project. If approved, the current Dell switches will be replaced with the same brand for an estimated cost of $53,982.90. Following discussion, there was a motion made, seconded, and passed, and I'll move the recommendation of the committee to authorize staff to purchase new networking switches for City Hall in the old and new waste treatment plants in the amount of $53,982.90.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Councilmember Anderson.
The next item was Pioneer Land Library in Candioi County consent to lease. Staff explained to the committee that Candioi County and the City of Wilmer jointly own the Wilmer Public Library. The county has sole responsibility for maintenance of the facility and leases a portion to Pioneer Land Library Regional System. Since the city is part owner, the county is requesting the city to sign a consent to lease form extending the lease for another 5 years. That will be 2017 through 2021, using a 3% cost of living adjustment. The current 5-year lease, which expires December 31st, 2016, had also incorporated an annual 3% cost of living adjustment. If this lease extension is approved, Pioneer Land would be required to remit $39,475.18 for 2017, $40,660.05 for 2018, $41,879.85 for 19, $43,136.25 for 2020, and $44,430.34 for 2021. The lease revenue would offset part of the city's share of the annual maintenance and operation costs. It was noted the city's share of these costs is 60% and the county's share is 40%. Following discussion, there was a motion made, seconded, and passed, and I'll introduce a resolution authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute the consent to lease form for Pioneer Land Library lease extension covering 2017 through 2021 as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Amon.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Meske.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
Resolution passes.
The next item was the 2015 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and that's for information only. The staff explained to the committee that in preparation of receiving the independent auditor's annual report, which is scheduled for next Monday, August 22nd at our finance meeting, staff again brought the 2015 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report to the committee for discussion. Cash and fund balances were discussed, as well as timing of payments received from various governmental entities. Councilmember Nelson requested that a detail of cash balances be provided with their associated spending restrictions currently in place. Councilmember Christensen requested this detail of the fund balance as well. This was for information only. The next item has to do with the mayor's proposed 2017 budget. Staff reported that the presentation of the mayor's proposed 2017 budget is tentatively set for Wednesday, August 31st, 2016, here in the council chambers. Confirmation of the meeting will be forthcoming to the council. That was for information only. Unless there's questions, I'd move to file these minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to file minutes. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The motion does carry. Next, we have consideration of ordinance to rezone ACMC parcels from R2 to LB and GB. Light business, general business? Mr. Limited business, general business. Mr. Cruz.
Mr. Mayor and Council, before you is a request to set a public hearing on September 6th for introduction of an ordinance to rezone AMC parcels from R2, that's 1 and 2 family residential and limited business, to general business. AMC proposes to construct a new surgery center on their campus south of the old Roosevelt School. They have several parcels in 3 different zones within the campus, with the main AMC clinic and existing surgery center being zoned general business. They wish for the new surgical center and remainder of the campus to also be general business for uniformity. The rezoning was approved by the Planning Commission. A request to set a public hearing.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to set a hearing for a public hearing on the ordinance for September 6th. Well, that was hard for me to get out. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next is consideration of preliminary final plat ACMC Common Interest Community. Mr. Cruz.
Mr. Mayor and Council, before you is a request to adopt the preliminary and final plat for the AMC Common Interest Community. The subdivision is a replat of 4 existing parcels into 2 lots and 2 outlots for future development of a surgery center and associated parking, access, and stormwater ponding. They are attempting to clean up the west half of the campus and allows for shared drives, parking, and stormwater for various owners and entities on the campus. The Planning Commission approved that plat with the condition regarding utility easements, stormwater provisions, water mains, and the covenants and declarations that will dictate the common areas in the lot. So a request to approve the preliminary and final plat of ACMC Common Interest Community.
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Is this a roll call, Kevin? Councilmember Metsky?
No.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Nelson?
Just a clarification that this does not include the parking, that'll come back, if I understand correctly?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, is this a simple motion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next is set a special hearing for unpaid weed, grass mowing removal. Mr. Halliday.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you have before you a list of properties, property owners, and the cost of cutting weeds or grass. And throughout the calendar, or the fiscal year of August 1st, 2015 through July 31, 2016, the list here is those under consideration that have not paid, to have them assessed as a special assessment in conformance to Minnesota Statutes 429. That does require a hearing for each property, and it is staff's recommendation that we set the hearing for September 6th for all the individuals that are listed, unless they pay in the meantime.
It's your call.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next is set a special hearing for unpaid nuisances in general. Mr. Halliday.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you have before you a list of 1 property and address where boarding up and securing of an inhabitable building was conducted by our city or our agent, and the costs thereof have been billed to this individual and not been paid. Pursuant to special assessments in Chapter 429, we recommend you set a hearing to consider objections to this assessment. Set that also for September 6th.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to set a special hearing for September 6th for unpaid nuisances in general. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next, we have consideration of a date for work session to define local option sales tax projects, initiatives, and other business. That suggested date is Tuesday, September 6th at 4:45. The council meeting will be at 7, so this would be a meeting prior to the council meeting. Council, what are your wishes? Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you give me maybe a little more clarity? What it is what are we gonna talk about? I mean, we've set the ballot question. What does this do?
Well, I think staff is working on, because we directed them to identify the projects within those 3 scopes. So the Robbins Island, Swanson Field, and Civic Center. And staff will then be coming back and making a recommendation to us so that when we approve that, when we talk about that, we approve those projects within those dollar amounts, the $10 million, then that's how the materials will be presented to the public. And so this is just to update the council on what's going on that particular issue, but also one of the things that had been asked of the city administrator was to have more communication with the council. So that's why other items of interest would be included in that discussion. So this is basically a reaction to the council's evaluation of the city administrator and also the local option sales tax project.
Okay.
My understanding. Councilmember Nelson.
So at the work session, we'll be able to actually have conversations regarding that and make changes to it, or will we have information before that, or is it just going to be presented to us?
No, I believe the information will be prepared and presented ahead of time. Correct, Mr. Cruz?
Mayor Calvin and Council, the Community Education Recreation Committee, and I believe maybe a subcommittee, the former Park Board, is going to look at the capital improvement plan and try and make a recommendation to the workshop and get your concurrence and input. And then, assuming everybody can reach agreement on, the scope of projects for the local option sales tax, then that could be adopted at the council meeting, and then staff will begin to prepare some educational materials. As you know, the community center was a piece that was not included in that, but then the council also added an additional million for Robbins Island and Swanson Field. And so we want to look at the CIP, see what those projects are, and gain concurrence from the council. That's the direction you want to go.
Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure I understand. Short and sweet, we're going to discuss how the money is going to be spent on each of the 3 items, correct?
Yes.
Councilmember Amon.
In light of our current situation, I know, is it too late to revise any of those numbers into different programs or different options?
Yes, it is.
I think we should reconsider, definitely, based on the discussions I've had with people, to look more at solving the problems that we've had for many years that we seem to be ignoring. And I think they're right in that regard. It's overdue. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, Mr. Scott, we can't change the question at this point, correct?
That's correct. The council has passed the resolution, and we are actually beyond now the 90-day in advance of the election deadline for getting the resolution passed. So you are basically locked into the projects identified in your resolution.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember?
Yeah, sure does. Thank you.
Councilmember Nelson.
I do think that Councilmember Amon's comments, though, do speak to the fact that this council hasn't had a strategic plan for a long time. And I think there are some issues out there that we need to sit back and look at our CIP with that. And we have not provided direction as to priorities with that. And, we had a discussion at the Finance Committee about the local option sales tax, but I think we've got a park plan, we've got the bar report, we've got lots of things that we've done and set on the shelf that we perhaps need to be taking a look at, and the priorities for this community. So, I think I still support the local option sales tax that's brought forward, but I think our CIP and other options provide think we need to be looking back at that and setting some goals and looking at some priorities for this community.
Okay, so is council in agreement then of meeting at 4:45 on September 6th? Okay, next is announcement of community meeting dates. Finance,
Finance will meet Monday, August 22nd, 4:45.
Public Works, Public Safety,
Tuesday, August 23rd, 4:45.
Labor,
Wednesday, August 24th or 23rd, whatever. 24th.
4:45,
4:45 as usual, yep.
and Community Development.
I'm assuming the 25th of August, 4:45.
Okay, sounds good. Again, just a reminder, Mayor's budget will be presented on Wednesday, August 31st at 4:45 in these chambers. And then tomorrow is the Destination Playground Design Day. That will be happening both at the YMCA and at Roosevelt. Going to Wilmer Playground, and you can look it up on Facebook or on the web. Also, Rockin' Robbins is tomorrow night. That's out at the Robbins Island, and I was out there this evening with Mr. Brizendine, and they are all set to go. They may have to set it up a little different, but they're hoping they can set it up the same way. Again, that starts at 5 o'clock, and then at 6:30 there will be a presentation on the playground, and then the headliners will be playing after that's over. So it should be a great evening. Good things that happening here in Wilmer, and encourage everybody to get involved. So. Councilmember Nelson.
Just a question on parking out there with the water situation. Will there be less parking out there tomorrow night?
I'm not exactly sure on that. Mr. Felt, do you know? Chief Felt, I'm sorry.
Need to learn how to work a microphone, I guess. So I do not know if they've restricted parking at this point. I know they are encouraging people to use the shuttle buses from the various areas to get in. That's something they're going to be determining tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, thank you. I know that the websites are pushing the remote parking pretty heavily. So again, those remote sites are Heritage Bank downtown, Kennedy School, and the junior high or the middle school. Okay, appreciate that. Anything else for the good of the order?
Move to adjourn.
Motion's been made and seconded. We are adjourned.
Stuff to